Good morning, Troy. My name is James Rosenstein. I'm on the board of One Business World, and it's a real pleasure to welcome you here this morning to talk about issues that are really most important. So let me introduce you, Troy Escoval. You are the CEO of TEDCO, and we very much look forward to hearing your views on learning about the 4 Ps: people, product, plan, and profit. So I hand it over to you, and thank you very much for your presence.
Well, thank you. Appreciate you, and appreciate One Business World and Celios for having me here today. And most importantly, to the young entrepreneurs of the world. That is, I just love saying that. I love talking about young entrepreneurs. And before I get into the presentation, again, thank you for the intro, James. You know, I am an engineer by training. I have a degree in engineering, a degree in computer science, and I went and got my MBA. But even with that technical background, what I really love is the history of words. And I love studying what's called etymology, the history of words. And the reason I want to bring, because I talk about entrepreneurship, and there's the word hope. And when I think about innovation, I think about the word hope, because too many times we think of hope as some wishful thinking type of thing. But if you really think about the real history of the word hope, if you study it, and you look at the Hebrew and the Greek and the Indo-European, what it really means when you combine them all together, what it really means is a confident expectation that things will change. And that is the essence of entrepreneurship. The essence of entrepreneurship, young folks, is how do you bring something that is impossible to possible? How do you bring the improbable to the probable? How do you bring what can't be seen to being seen? And that's what entrepreneurship is about. And so I applaud you for wanting to be on this journey and taking this journey. But, you know, as part of that, let's be real. The world to do, you need resources to make that hope happen, to have that confident expectation. You have to have someone who believes in you. So I want to spend a few minutes today talking about this thing called venture capital. And I'm not sure where, you know, this is kind of communications 101. Not sure where different ones of you are in understanding venture capital. So some of you, this might be somewhat elemental. So my apologies for that, but I hope you do learn something. Some of it will be a reinforcement of what you may have understood. And then for others, it actually may be a new thing. So I'm hoping I'm able to do that chasm across all 3 of you. So with that, so the title is, you know, the 4 Ps, which we'll get to, but the real title is, as you just showed me, the dollars, because that's really what this is about. You want to be able to move your idea. You want to take this concept you have, and you want to be able to bring it to fruition and have someone believe in you so that your hope can be realized. And so I want to try to answer 3 questions today. What is this thing called venture capital? What does a venture capital really look for? And how do you actually do that thing called a pitch? And so again, somewhat elemental, but I want to expand the conversation and really help you understand. I call it risk capital here, but it's really about your capital stack. And I won't get into a lot of it, but there's a range of types of capital that you can have. But at a real simple level, you can have this thing we're going to talk about today, risk capital or venture capital, which is a form of risk capital. You could have debt capital, which is obviously getting a loan. And actually, for some of you that are into some of the technology areas, there's non-dilutive funding through a government entity that allows you to get what's called SBIR. That's non-dilutive just means you're able to get money and it doesn't create it's not a loan, nor does it create equity. And we'll explain equity in a minute. So for those of you, and if you want to learn more about that, we can talk to you here at TEDCO about that, even if you're not in the state of Maryland. But there's a range of forms of risk capital, from angels and friends and family, small business investment corps, corporate leverage buyouts, IPOs. But today, we're going to talk about venture capital. And venture capital in a very professional way is pools of capital that investors have put with individuals like myself. And they said, I want you to take this money and invest it in a certain stage of company. We'll talk about stages of company in a second, stage of company. And I want to get a return for that because I've taken on a risk. And so again, being really elemental here, the definition of risk is, you know, if you're really early stage, if it's really just, you just finished, you know, drawing on the back of a napkin, that actually is a huge amount of risk that someone's going to take on. So they're going to want a higher return in order for them to take on that risk. But if you've really moved that product along, you have some customers who are paying, you've shown that you've gone beyond what I call the risk of failure, the risk is lower. But you need more money probably at that stage. And so there's that trade-off between the amount of capital you need and the risk you are and the stage at which you're doing. But that's what venture capital is how do we, and more times than not, venture capital versus private equity is normally in the early stages of the evolution of a firm. And so I always say it's got these people called limited partners. These are the people who put their money in. These could be high net worth individuals, very rich individuals, could be insurance companies or other investment companies that are putting this pool into play. And again, they're expecting a certain return. The management company, like myself, we take on, when we get those funds, we take on sourcing those companies, determining if we should make those investments. That's called sourcing and due diligence. We actually obviously negotiate deal terms. We have to then monitor the progress. So it's not just that. We're going to also talk about how that monitoring takes place, because it's not just about check writing. It's also about making sure that you're going to become a success, and there's more to it. And eventually, hopefully, a successful exit of that firm, which means an exit meaning that we have successfully put $1 in, and that dollar has become 10, 100,000, 10,000, whatever dollars down the road. And so when we make that investment in your company as a venture capitalist, we're investing in this thing called equity. And at a real simple level, equity means is I have an ownership stake. And remember that capital stack that I talked about, again, really simple. There is a real simple type of capital. There's debt and there's equity. Debt is normally issued and you have to repay it at some interest rate. But what they have what's called at first kind of the lien advantage. If something goes wrong, if the company doesn't make it, that bank or that lending entity can come in and take that money. And so where banks are traditionally looking at what you have done and can you repay the loan, a venture capitalist, we're looking at, yes, what you have done, but more importantly, what you will do. Because it's not about repaying a loan, but it's about creating an instrument that allows me to put that dollar in and that somebody else is willing to pay us another $100,000, $10,000. That again is that multiple, right? Because if I put a dollar in and I get 10 back, that's 10x or 100x. And so I'm trying to get that multiple on that $1 that I put in. And that's the whole point. The other thing we're trying to do, obviously, is to protect our downside. In other words, when we negotiate a deal, we particularly in those early stages where there's a lot of risk, part of the negotiations is protection of the downside. And some of that has to do with the amount of equity or ownership stake that a venture capitalist will take, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And so I mentioned this a couple of times, that when you're in these various stages of growth, as you move from angel to seed stage to a bridge to an IPO, the amount of returns changes because, again, the risk has changed. But also what's not really talked about here in this particular slide is how that also relates to the amount of money, because I could put a little bit of money and maybe not expect a 50, 100% return, but I could put a lot more money in, so that money is more at risk, even at a growth stage or expansion stage. I could be putting more risk. So don't take these as gospel. This is just give you some idea of the types of range, but these numbers can change even with the stage, even with a later stage. A higher return could be expected if there's a lot more cash flow. So as an example, we invest in a lot of in TechCo because we're here in Maryland. We invest in a lot of bio and life sciences companies. So they have a very long tail to them in terms of how long our investment will stay to them. Time is an element here that I didn't mention. So how long we think the investment will have to stay in place in order for us to do a realization or exit. And so because these things take such a long time, even at the early stage or as we put in multiple stages, the risk is still there because there's things like clinical trials and FDA approvals that have to happen. And so those risks are still inherent even in the early stage, even as we're putting more money in. So you could see 50 to 100% type returns required even in a later stage with that as their progression because of the nature of that sector that we're investing in. And so I mentioned a few moments ago that when a venture capitalist puts money into an enterprise, it's not just about the money. That venture capitalist, someone like myself, is putting my time and the history that I have with you. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about the type of people that we invest in. So I'll save for that. But the real point is that as a venture capitalist, our goal isn't just about writing checks. Our goal is to really be a partner with you and with your firm. And I think people get scared because I come in and I'm trying to run your thing. I don't want to run your company. If you're doing the right things and hitting the right milestones and doing the right things, then you're doing the right stuff. And so don't get so worried about, sometimes people get worried about giving up control. It's not about giving up control. It's about creating the scale that you need to reach to so that dream can be hope, can become a confident expectation. Remember, that's all, we're always going to come back to that. And so our goal is to make sure that you have the right resources, and the resources is beyond the money. You have access to customers, you have access to talent, you have access to lawyers, you have access to whatever your company needs for your success. Because remember, I'm partnering with you. I've got our money, just like you've got your sweat and your equity, your time and your talent to it. I have our money, and our money is represented by all those other investors that I've got to have that are putting on me to saying, we're expecting a return. I'm putting on you. I've got to make sure that returns. So there is a symbiotic relationship here that goes beyond just the check writing that happens. And so I see here, the next Bill Gates, this is a little bit dated. I probably should have said the next Elon Musk, if I was right. But we're going to now move into kind of how, so we've set up what is a venture capital firm, what it is that they're trying to do, what types of, kind of the structure of that. Now we want to get into how do you begin to tell your story? And this is all about storytelling. And so this is about storytelling, and how do you answer the question of why you have something the market is asking for? What is it? How are you so different, and what makes you different? What makes you different, and what makes what you're trying to do different? Those are two different things. And how are you going to make this happen? What are you thinking about? Have you really done your homework to understand who else is doing this, how you compare to them, and what type of capital you're going to need in order to start this and get it moving? Those are the type of things we're going to here talk about. And there's this notion, you've heard this, I'm sure some of you have heard this notion of the elevator test. And I had it happen to me very early in my career. I used to work at McKinsey. I had it very early in my career. I was working at this big computer manufacturer, and I happened to get in the elevator with the CEO at the time of this company. And he had met me a few times, and he was asking me, I had just started. I was there maybe just a few weeks, and I kind of had a sense of what it was. And I remember telling him, kind of a number range that I thought we would be at. It was a sales question. And so fast forward months later, I'm sitting in one of those, huge boardrooms in the back, because I'm the junior associate on the team. And I get called to the table, and my number was close, but I had done that in that elevator. The elevator went from the first floor to the fifth floor of this particular building. And in those few minutes, because it went straight up, didn't stop, I was able to very succinctly tell him what it is we were working on, and at least at that time, my hypothesis of what that was. So in order to do that, I think there are four things that you do. And look, I'm an old, I grew up in the Catholic Church. I was surrounded by a number of Black Baptist preachers in the South. And so I think one of the tools that a lot of people use is alliteration. In other words, doing things that start with the same letter or have some connotations to them. And so 4 Ps. And so hopefully you'll remember the 4 Ps. We're going to talk about people. We're going to talk about product. We're going to talk about plan, and talk about profit. Okay. Those are the 4 Ps. Those are the 4 things that any venture capitalist is looking for. And we're going to start with people, because that is the most important. And this first statement that I have here is flat out the thing that drives me every day. When the team brings me a deal for our analysis, my first question is, are they coachable? Are they coachable? Back to my earlier point about advice, are they coachable? It doesn't matter if they can solve all the world's problems. If they're not coachable, we don't want to put money. They can go find somebody else's money. Or said in other ways, I learned many, many years ago when I first got into this space and worked with some of the great venture capital firms in Silicon Valley and Sand Hill Road. They told me, almost all of them told me, always invest in A quality people with a B quality plan, and never the reverse. Never A quality plan with B quality people. In other words, we're investing in you. We are investing in your passion. We're investing in your intellect. We're investing in your drive. We're investing in you as much as your plan, as much as your product, as much as your profit. We are investing in you and who you are and what you represent, how you carry yourself into that meeting, how you articulate yourself into that meeting, how you've done your research. Do I believe you're gonna, sleep, eat, drink, sweat this company? That's what I want to get a sense of when I first meet you. And I want to understand what made you come to this point of realizing that this was something personal? Was it something professional? How did you come to this idea that this was the idea, and how did you come to this idea? That's the type of things I want to understand. And then how do I help you build a team around where you might have some skill gaps? And so understanding you helps us help you build out the team that you need. And so The people part is foundational. It starts with that, it ends with that. If you could have the greatest next product, the greatest next idea, but if you got the wrong people, it just will not work. Which obviously I've already been alluded to the product. And so the question with product is, why is the market asking for this? Or what is the market doing that you can do better? And that's what I want to be able to understand. And so the simple example that I use, and I use this when we also talk about profit too, but I'll use it here, is if you got a fork, there's a fork on the marketplace right now. And this fork is off the chain. It is really good. And people are paying $100 for this fork. And you have a fork that you come along, and it's highly innovative fork. And this fork, you can make for $2 or $3. I'm gonna come to pricing later. But the question is, why do people want to buy your fork? What's so innovative about your fork that people who are paying $100 for a fork, we're gonna get to pricing, as I said, but just the question of why is your fork needed? Why is the market asking for your fork over the fork that's in the marketplace? That's the question you have to be able to address, and understanding why this product is here and how you're going to be able to, and frankly, how how much it costs to make this thing is a fundamental piece of that, which then brings us to the plan. And so, have you really been thought? This is where the homework comes in, because so many times, many entrepreneurs are, particularly in the technology space, they've got a great idea, they've got a great service or product or SaaS product, whatever it is, but they haven't thought about the plan. And one of the questions I ask all the time is, how are you going to sell this? Who are you going to sell it to? How are you going to sell it? What type of channels are people buying it from? Do you have to go and create new channels? How are you going to create some demand for this product? And so these are really, this is, I would say, as much as people is important, this is the next critical one, because many times there's not a thoughtful sense of how you're going to sell this, who you're going to sell to, the channels you're going to do it, the economics associated with those channels. And all that has to be thought. And then that has to be married up against the stages. So when you're early stage, that's one plan and that's one go-to-market. As you get some customers, as you grow to some scale, that's a different type of channel market strategy that you have to have, and how you do presence. And so thinking through that is really fundamental. I think this trips up a lot of early stage companies. And the last one is profit. At the end of the day, you have to make money. And so, do I have the right people? Do I have a product that people want to buy? Do I know how I'm going to sell that product to them? And can I make money? And back to the fork. So here's the question. So again, you got this great fork. Now the market is saturated with this one fork for $100. They're the market leader by a long shot. You got this cool fork that you can make for $5. Now everybody's paying $100 for this fork that does some good stuff, but your fork actually has far more innovation than the fork that's on the market, but you can make yours for $5. Here's the question. What are you going to sell your fork for? Now, I know we don't have an interactive ability here, but I'll go ahead and give you the, if you try to sell it if you start to sell it for anything under $100, you've left some money on the table. If you sell it, some people answer, I sell it for $15 or $20. Why? The market's paying $100 for a fork that has inferior products to yours. Now, I get the whole point of how do I gain share, and I can gain share by getting in the market, but you think that company is going to sit there and let you gain share with their $100 fork, with their margins? You got to be able to produce some margins at the beginning, so that, because at some point there's going to be a potential price war. You also have to understand the market that you're in and the commoditization that can occur. And so part of what you're going to have to think through is that right pricing that gives you some scale, gives you market share, but also gives you margin, so that when the inevitable happens, that you're going to get into a price war, you can sustain yourself. But that's the whole point of profit. How do you move yourself, and how do you think about that pricing, which is the fifth P, if you will, is the pricing, but that's baked into the profit. So look, I'm going to be closing out here soon. This is just some kind of thoughts. Look, this is, as you go through this process, the whole point is you're selling yourself, you're selling your idea, and you're selling your abilities and capabilities to make that thing happen. Because you want what they have, that's a check writing, but you also want what they have, which is access to customers, access to talent, access to other resources that you might need. And so as you think about it, make sure this is a journey. And by the way, you're going to get a lot more no's probably than you get yeses. That's part of this journey. And so you're going to have some tough skin in going through this process. And you also got to understand that not every venture capital firm is for you. Do your research. There are some venture capital firms that only invest in certain sectors or certain stages. You need to understand that, because you just wasted your time if you're talking to a company or a firm that doesn't invest in the sector that you're trying to, or at the stage of the investment that you're trying to be in. So there is homework here. Not every money is money you want to go after, or you can actually go after. You will waste your time. So to kind of move to the end here, things to avoid. Some of this is pretty Pollyannish, but stick to. I think the point of all this is stick to. You're the right person. This is the question the market is asking. We know we can make this. I or we can make this happen through this plan. This is what's missing. Be honest about what you don't have. And this is how you think the economics is going to play. Because by the way, I didn't say this when I'm talking about the A and B folks. There's not been, in all the years that I've done this, there's not been a plan that we initially invested in that if we made money on it, that was the plan at the beginning. That plan changed because of the ability to listen. Was there a kernel of the idea there? Absolutely. But we were able to take that kernel, that seed, and transform into something that made everybody well off. And so focus on that. Don't focus on how filthy what you're going to get or how. Don't focus on that. Focus on, I have an idea. This is why it's a great idea, and this is why I can do it. Focus on that. And then also, the whole notion of valuation. I didn't speak about that, but valuations is a big deal. Don't get me wrong. But don't get overly focused on that. Wait till you get to negotiations. Focus on, do they want to invest? You have more than enough time to negotiate about valuations and how much, valuation just means, if I value a company at $10 and I put $1 in, then I've got 10% of your company. And so, but if I put $5 in, I have 50% of your company at a simple level. And so don't get overly focused on it at the beginning. It's an important piece, but don't focus on it. Focus on, do you have the audience? Are you sending them the right message? And are you the right alignment to what they do and to what you're trying to do? That's the fundamental thing I want you to focus on. And then, this is me again. You can visit us at tedcomd.com. We have, for those of you that happen to be in the Maryland or the DMV market, we invest in early stage technology companies. We do everything from pre-seed all the way through Series A. We write anything from a $150,000 to $200,000 check to over $2 million check at the Series A, B level. So again, but we talk to people all over the country and make sure that they get to those areas. So I couldn't thank you enough. Stelios and James, thank you all for having me today. Thank you all, young entrepreneurs of the world. Continue to be yourselves, continue to look for those opportunities, and most importantly, continue to make hope become a reality. Remember, hope is the confident expectation that you can make things happen, and that's what entrepreneurship is about. Again, thank you, James and Stelios, for having me here today.
Troy, thank you so much for this most interesting presentation. And I can't help asking myself, if you're confronting a brand new idea, somebody who comes up with something like 40, 50 years ago, a little thing called internet, or more recently, a little thing called Bitcoin. If it's something so new, what are the things that finally catch you? I mean, because I can see in creating a relationship like this, there's always something a bit unknown, a bit unsure. And what is it that finally leads you into it?
No, it's all good stuff. And so, yeah, when you're that's like a crypto or internet 30 or 40 years ago, that when you're really bleeding edge, I think that's even more so, James, where it's about your ability to articulate the question of why the market. Because think about being able to articulate, if you're AOL, most of you out there won't know what I'm talking about. AOL was really the first mass market internet service provider that most of us use for dial-up. And when they first got their first funding, what was this thing they were trying to connect to? And I think they sold it on the fact that we all had these things called computers. And so they were able to link what we were doing with what could be. And that's what you are selling. You're selling the horizon. And I talk about that all the time, James, is the ability to sell the horizon. And where you really get real opportunities is if you can see the horizon, articulate the horizon, and show a pathway to that horizon better, faster, cheaper than anybody else. And that's the real answer to your question is, be able to, if particularly when you're bleeding edge, be able to show the horizon, why the horizon has a possibility. And by the way, not all horizons mapping. You know, you're not probably old enough to remember, you know, when in our cool technology, you know, there was a whole debate that went on for years over beta versus VHS. Well, reality, technically, beta was a better technical product, but VHS did a better job of, as I said earlier, go to market. They had a better go to market plan than the beta folks did. And so back to that vision, back to the horizon involves also not just always the best technology, but more importantly, sometimes the ability to how to get to that market in a mass way.
Wow. Thank you so much. It takes a lot of insight to do this, and we appreciate your contribution and your presence. And I'm sure there are a number of people who will want to be in touch with you. You did show your email. So we thank you very much and look forward to future contacts.
Thank
you
you
so much,
Appreciate you
Troy.
all. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
entrepreneurs. Be well. Be safe.
Yes, you too. Thank you.